everyone. Welcome back to the Epic Gardening Podcast. We have been diving into the world of cannabis cultivation this week with Lee Spivey of Good Earth Organics, who also runs his own cannabis cultivation farm and has for quite some time. So, Lee, we're at the harvest at this point, and first of all, is there a way that you like to remove the buds from the plant that makes sense, that works well and preserves the harvest?
Yes, there is. So essentially, I just cut the buds on the stalk, about the size of my forearm, from the fist to the elbow is what size I like to keep my cuttings, because after that they get hung, right? So hung to dry. I never process my cannabis while it's wet. I only cut it to dry it. A lot of people will like to begin trimming and processing wet cannabis, which is fine. Your prerogative is your own. I believe that drying it before processing it keeps the terpene profile intact. It keeps the trichomes better. I believe that the bud is just more palatable and better product for a medical consumer when it's dried first, instead of being processed immediately.
Okay, so you're gonna harvest the way that you just mentioned, and then you'll dry it. And do you set up some sort of massive drying rack? Because you mentioned 30 plants, right? And I'd imagine you got to have like a pretty large space to dry that out.
Personally, I do. Yes, I have a 52-foot container that is all gutted, and we hang trellis in, and all the plants get dried right there. So we hang trellis horizontally or vertically from the ceiling to the floor, and hang the sticks and stems right on it with the flowers.
Got it. And then how long are you drying for? Do you move it indoors? Like, what kind of conditions you want to be drying that in?
Great question. Super important information. So anything less than 60% humidity is great. So I put my dehues. I have 2 dehues in the container as well, right? Usually October is fairly wet, and the rain does not help. So we run dehues pretty much all the time, keeping our humidity as low as possible, under 60%, and just keep going until you feel the stems on that stalk snap. Not break off completely, but just you want to hear a little crunch when you bend the stem, and that's when you know it's ready to be cured.
So you're not necessarily looking for it to be bone dry, devoid of all water, but somewhat close to that at least.
Yeah, no, and the fruit itself will still have a lot of water weight in it.
Yeah.
But you're just looking for that stem to be at that right moment when you know that you can cut those buds off of that stem. And then personally, I go into a paper bag, brown paper bag. I start there. I let the paper bag, you've had a cardboard box sit outside overnight before, right?
Right.
And how it's wet but dry. It does such a good job at releasing and retaining moisture. And that's really where the cure begins for cannabis, is that retention and release of moisture.
Yeah, so when we talk about curing like onions or garlic, or even potatoes, I guess, it's such a more basic process of just leaving them in the shade for, I don't know, onions like 2 weeks or something like that. You leave them in the sun for a couple of days, bring them back into the shade, and you're done. And it sure sounds like with cannabis that process is a little bit more intense.
It is. Cannabis it's an accumulator plant, so it has all that chlorophyll and stuff in the vegetation still. And by allowing the cure to happen, by burping it, by that air release and exchange, it really gets rid of that chlorophyll, which brings out those flavor profiles, which is why cannabis is such a connoisseur's fruit, right?
So how do you cure it then? What's the process for that?
Essentially, my paper bags, in and out, a few days there, and then they go into either glass jars or turkey bags, and then put inside of a tote for light protection. Light degrades everything. So
sure. So at that point, after the cure, they're just ready to store and use and do whatever you want at that point.
And like a fine wine, if stored properly, it gets better with age.
Is there a time in which that doesn't hold, though, like after 7 years or something like that?
I've never kept cannabis that long. I don't know anybody else who has either. So not properly stored cannabis will turn like really brown and things like that. It'll lose its smells. It'll lose its flavors. I believe it loses potency. I couldn't attest to that actually, because once it turns that, I am not using it.
Sure. Makes sense. Okay. Any final little tips then on this post-harvest process? Any tips, on I know like the trimming of it can be a bit of a hassle, right? So is there anything you use there to speed that up?
Yeah, trimming. What a job. Yes, to speed up trimming, I simply leave it in the bag as long as I can, let it dry out and shake it.
So they crunch off?
Right, exactly.
Interesting.
And then, all those water leaves are gone. And in the way we buck everything down pretty small, so we don't put hand size nuggets in bags or anything like that. It's all broken down pretty far. So at that point, once it gets broken down off the stems, there's not a whole lot of leaves left to begin with.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's helpful. Yeah. All right. Cool. Great little primer on processing an epic cannabis harvest. Stay tuned, guys. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.
Epic Gardening is and always will be an ad-free podcast. But if you would like to support, one surprising thing you can do is actually just to review the podcast. It helps way more than you would think in iTunes, and it's very easy to do. Just head on over to iTunes, go to Epic Gardening, and drop a review. And you can also do it on your podcasts app if you're using an Apple device. Thank you so much. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.